Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favourite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Ange McArthur is a late diagnosed autistic ADHD 31-year-old mother of two boys. Eldest is confirmed autistic, youngest is heavily suspected. Ange is working as an independent NDIS support coordinator with other adults and children who are neurodivergent. Ange is doing her part to make the NDIS space more accessible for them. Ange is also a victim and survivor of sexual violence, and she is working towards building more of herself in those spaces so she can help other people. Ange McArthur, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you for having me.
So how does your ADHD diagnosis affect your ability to manage time and be punctual as a mother and a business owner?
This has actually become really prevalent in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if it's because we've just had school holidays finish and I'm also kind of doing these ones up and down through burnout, but I have learnt I need to be someone's obviously just ringing the doorbell at the moment, how convenient. I need to give myself a lot of grace because I have noticed, particularly as my kids get older, they are more reluctant to do what I say and leave the house. One's confirmed autistic, the other I'm like, you're definitely ADHD like your mother. And it's just getting increasingly difficult to get them out of the house. So I've had to really give myself grace, and I confirmed with school, I was like, what time do you start calling me if we're not there? And also I've reduced my work hours as well, just so that I don't run the risk of letting anyone down, especially with my booking system. But I'm pretty lucky. The people that I work with are quite understanding, which is fabulous. It takes a lot of the stress away. And I think I'm also lucky too that I've been able to create my own role that I can make those accommodations, which is really handy.
Okay, so in what ways do you navigate challenges with being late diagnosed while juggling the responsibilities of raising two children with special needs and running a business at the same time?
I honestly think I just wing it. Hey, I don't have, somebody asked me this not long ago, and I don't have any sort of special magical advice. I basically, it comes back to giving myself that grace. I has set it up so that it works. I'm pretty transparent with the people that I work with. But I was working Monday to Friday pretty well flat out, but I've had to really dial back. I have to have every second Wednesday off to take my little to his therapies, which was really hard to do initially. I felt so bad, but it's become a non-negotiable, but it kind of helps me anyway, because it does give me that chance to be with him and reset a little bit. But the hardest part has been the chop and changing to my routine, because being autistic, I really like that routine, but being a parent, the routine isn't always able to be. So yeah, I think the only tips I have, if there's informal supports around, which unfortunately for us, we don't have a great deal, is to rely on those and ask for help when you need it. That might look like formal supports as well. So whatever that looks like, ask for help, get the help, and yeah, welcome it, because I think even without being a business owner, being a mum and neurodivergent and having little neurodivergent children wasn't set up to be smooth by any means, or easy. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you communicate with your team and clients about your neurodivergence and potential for occasional lateness?
I have been quite lucky. I've worked with the people that I have now for some time, and they kind of know. I communicate things so if I have someone ask me if I have capacity, my answer is typically, I do, but I need to preface that my response time may be a little longer than I like, which is still within the week. Sometimes it goes outside of the week, but I typically get back, I didn't hear from my current support coordinator for 2 months, and like that is wild to me. And I have an out of office, an auto reply that goes out with my hours and just basically saying your message is received. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I am looking to change it just to say basically, if you don't hear from me, feel free to follow me up. Like I always tell people, don't feel bad about having to chase anything because it might be the prompt that I need. I never don't do things out of spite or on purpose. I'm just really transparent. I don't like being quiet about it. Like I used to work in companies that did that. You'd send an email and never hear back, and I can't stand it. So yeah, I'm pretty open and transparent about it, which helps.
Okay. So, what strategies do you use to stay organized despite the challenges of your autism and ADHD?
I have my calendar and my reminders and alarms. Without those, I would be a hot mess. So I use Splos. So I have the calendar there, but it's linked in with my Gmail calendar. So anything that I book in my personal life goes on the Gmail calendar and blocks out my Splos calendar. So they kind of talk to each other, and I have reminders on everything. So if it's something really important, I'll set a reminder to tell me like a day or two before, and then there'll be another one 15 minutes before. And I've had to invite my partner to my personal calendar so that he knows what's going on. And so if he books something, I can see it. Otherwise, my reminders are on repeat. So the dogs get their worming medications on time. I reorder their worming medications because there's things that you just completely drop out of my brain. And my phone alarms as well. Like I've just finished up doing a SIBO breath test today, and I had to blow into a tube every 20 minutes. And so I had to set every 20 minutes. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So
Yeah. The calendar is useful. Actually, me and my wife actually sort of do particularly the same thing. It actually does help. So, how do you prioritize self care and mental health while managing the demands of motherhood, the business, and neurodivergence?
oh God, that's it. That's a hard one. I feel like I actually put up a story on my personal Instagram today about everyone, those people you see who like, oh, there's time for exercise, get up early, and all got the same 24 hours a day. And I'm like, no, we don't. My 24 hours looks nothing like yours. If you can get up early, like I probably could, but all of it, it's like, it's such a hard juggle. I feel like there needs to be more hours in a day. But I try to fit things into my calendar. That's where my reduction of work hours came in, because on a Monday and a Thursday, I have booked in a recurring Pilates day or hour. So my day starts after that. So that became the non-negotiable. I haven't been for 3 weeks, but I haven't been well, but that's like cemented in my calendar. So then the day starts around that. And I try not to change that, because that's when I lose the routine and then I lose the motivation to go. But I do that typical, the kids have gone to bed and I just doom scroll for like 3 hours before I go to bed, and then just wake up and do it all over again. So yeah, it's come a long way, but I have realized again the importance of it. So doing something for myself where I can, because otherwise it's just like repetitive. It's just mundane. So yeah.
So, have you encountered any lack of understanding or discrimination from your colleagues or clients due to your neurodivergence?
Not since working for myself. I especially not in this job. I definitely did when I did corporate admin for like 10 years. They I was okay with being on time and that sort of thing. The issues I came into were my desk was a pigsty, but that's how they viewed it. For me, it was like, I'm like, if I'm going to be here for 8 hours, I need to feel comfortable. So I had like those Coles minis, I had like all over my screens, and I just had little novelty items everywhere. And the boss hated it. He hated it. Um, and that's kind of been a theme throughout. It all kind of makes sense now that I'm diagnosed. But the only other drama I would have had was when I was a support worker prior to this role, trying to get the kids up and ready and trying to be at a support shift by 7:30 in the morning. Thankfully, they were really understanding and flexible, but it was just it was a lot. So I had to really set some boundaries and was like, I can't start that early. Can't even drop my kids to daycare until a certain time anyway. So, but yeah, I hadn't really run into. I've been pretty lucky, but I think that has come from jumping pretty well straight into working for myself because I've only got me to answer to. So, um, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so how do you advocate yourself and educate others about the unique challenges that you have as a mother and a business owner with ADHD?
I don't sugarcoat things. I try to be as like censored as I could be, but like I also don't want to put a mask on myself. I'm pretty open and honest about how hard it all is. I don't want to dance around that hardness and have this set this expectation. Like people say to me all the time, I don't know how you're doing it. Like, how are you doing that? And I honestly don't know. Like some days it's super easy, some days it's really hard. But I always tell myself and I tell other people to give yourself grace, have time when you need it. I mean, I had Monday off because I was unwell and I was like, if I don't take time to do nothing, I'm just going to keep like getting worse. But I felt so guilty and the understimulation was atrocious. But it's also like I remind myself that the people that I do work with are understanding. They get it. They don't ask the questions. They don't need me to explain myself. I think it's just that hangover of working in corporations and suit admin sort of era. But yeah, I'm always telling people like you're allowed to put yourself first, and you can only do what you can do. Like you're not a superhero. And especially at the moment, like the world's not set up to be able to juggle 17 balls in the air. Like it's just ridiculous at the moment. So we can only do what we can do.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that actually sort of digs into your passions a little bit. How do you handle situations where NDIS providers are not meeting their obligations or providing substandard care for your child or clients?
I've been fortunate so far with my son. So he's only in preschool, so we haven't had to do that yet. And I've been really lucky with the teams that we are working with because they are phenomenal. Um, but in terms of clients, I I'm a bit brutal. I I get the information. Like I'm realistic, so I'll give people a chance. So if I have my participant come to me and say, "Hey, this is what's happened," give me your perspective. I will put that to the provider as long as I've got the participant's permission, and I'll give them a chance. Sometimes I don't get a response at all. So I'm like, well, that tells me everything. Other times I get, they're like, I'm really sorry, let me make it right. So sometimes it's just coming down to educating people because I can always tell when it's somebody that's made a genuine mistake because I mean I don't know if you've read the price guide. It's not black and white. They really don't put things in a way that is like, yeah, there's no gray area. It's so ridiculously colorful in there. But I can also tell when people are genuinely just taking the piss and think they won't get caught and they think that no one's ever going to call them out on it. So they're usually ones that don't reply. But I, yeah, I have had to dismiss providers on the spot. I had someone say to me that their cleaner showed up and asked them why they were on NDIS and through the whole, you don't look autistic. And I
Hmm,
rang that
that
person and said,
ableism, yeah.
yeah, I was like, you need to leave. It's not even just the autism thing. It's like if you're working for someone whose funding is paying for you to be there, like you don't have, especially not on the first day, you don't ask questions. You're there to do a job. You don't need to know about that person and why they're on NDIS. It baffles me that people just go straight for those things. But yeah, I try to get both perspectives, but I will not hesitate to defend and advocate for a client if I need to. I do often have to remind myself of my role, but there have been times where I'm like, I don't care. Like this person
Hmm.
needs to know what they did was really wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also that privacy being broken and stuff like that as well, which is which is really important for NDIS clients.
Yeah, I never do anything like I would never get, say, a client came to me with concerns, I would never go straight to that provider without them knowing what I was doing.
Mm.
I always get their permission, because some of them do have apprehensions. So like, I don't want to get in trouble. And I'm like, well, if they retaliate that way and if you get in trouble, then that says more than what's happening right here. And I will support you till the end anyway. But yeah, I never would just do like in anything really.
Yeah, and putting the client first is so important. So, what steps do you take to identify and address bad providers in the NDIS space and protect the rights and well-being for those you care for?
I think it depends on the circumstance. Like the main one has been misuse of funding, and it depends. I've had a cleaner invoice one of my participants on a public holiday. I think they charged like 115 or something dollars an hour, and so
That's
the invoice was like,
crazy.
yeah, and I was like, you can't do that. Like I get you doing it on a public holiday, but unfortunately, this person's plan managed. So if you don't want to work a public holiday where you can't charge extra to like compensate, don't do the job on a public holiday or don't do it at all. Um, so that is currently, we had to escalate that because that provider basically said no to any sort of reimbursement. So I worked with the plan manager on that one, which was super handy. Um, Others I've seen, it's a lot of support coordinators. During a handover, I'll have someone approach me, and once I get access to their funding portal, they'll have mentioned that they have concerns, and I will sit there and I'll make a spreadsheet and I'll reconcile invoices. And you can always tell if, say, I had one the other day where 12 hours was charged for support coordination out of the 15 that they were given for the entire duration of their plan, and nothing was set up. They had used little to none of their core budget and only had used capacity for an FCA. So I'm looking at that, I'm like, 12 hours of support coordination and there's been nothing implemented. That's kind of a dead giveaway.
Mm.
That provider chose to ignore me as well, so that ended up being escalated. And like I always give them the chance, because that's also the other thing. Before you can even put a complaint in, you need to give them the chance to rectify it, and show that you have produced your complaint and let them know what's going on. That's what NDIS want to see. So I always try to I give people the chance, even though I do see somewhere I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Like I had another one who abruptly requested a handover from me for a client I have down the border of New South Wales, Victoria. She was not doing well. And I was like, amazing, cool, you're on the ground. I love that. No worries, let me know if you need anything. Months later, that person ended up in inpatient care. That support coordinator had done nothing. So they came back to me and
Horrible.
yeah, and they'd invoiced for 6 hours. And I was like, of what? Like 6 hours of what? You've done nothing. Which is really, it's really disappointing. Like I can see how people look at the NDIS and particularly this role and go, this is so easy. Like I can claim so easy. Which is the other thing I'm trying to get out, is that don't be afraid to ask questions, because if someone is legitimate in what they're charging, they'll have the progress notes to reconcile it.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I offer. I'm like, give us the progress notes and handover information so we can reconcile it. And if we can't, let's talk about a refund. If you
Mm.
can't do that, let's escalate it. So
Yeah, fair enough. Have you faced
yeah,
backlash over this?
not yet. No, I mean, I don't know. I've actually said to one of my friends who I work with in the space, I'm like, if I get myself a name for this, I'm not too worried about it, because like people shouldn't be, the only people that are going to have a problem with it are the ones that know they're doing the wrong thing and they don't want
Mm.
to get caught. So yeah, and I've had complaints officers like pat, give me a little head pat, like thank you. I'm like, no worries, I'll just, you guys do you, I'll do me, whatever, I'll help you out where I can. But no, not to my face anyway. Like I'm sure I've upset people
Mm.
along the way and I don't really care. So
And I think being honest in this space is actually really good for actually sort of protecting NDIS participants and stuff like that, especially in the autism space.
exactly, like you've got people that do misuse funds, and like there are people, I'm like, I only work with autistic children and adults, so we're pretty good at like explaining and providing evidence and things like that. Whereas people, I think, providers especially and NDIS forget that there are people on the scheme that they have cognitive impairments. That means they can't register like what's going on, or they can't explain it. And so that then goes, and they don't have the informal supports to sit beside them in these meetings and go, hey, 80% of core was used because of this person, like this provider did that. But NDIS just go, oh, you've misused your funds, so we're going to do this and make you agency managed and, you know, reduce your funds. Like it's just, it's hard. So that's where it's really frustrating when you do see providers that do this, because it's like you're kind of ruining it for everybody else. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you stay resilient and maintain a strong stance when advocating for better standards and practices within the NDIS, despite potential resistance or criticism? I'm sorry about the stumbling there.
No, that's okay. I'm the same. I think it does. I can't act like it doesn't affect me, especially the last couple of weeks and some of the planning meetings that I've had, and the NDIS staff that I speak to have really, like, I've taken a massive hit. Like I've kind of, it's not been good. I've learnt, like, I love my job. I love my job. I don't want to go anywhere. And I feel like for so long, systems like this have relied on people just tapping out because it's too hard. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. It's not even just for the people I work with. It's not just for me. It's for my kid and his peers out there that are going to have to navigate this system, and the children that I do currently support. Like it needs to be better. So I do take that time as I need it. I try to fill my cup as much as I can, which looks like a lot of whinging on TikTok and LinkedIn that I've recently kind of learned how to navigate. But yeah, I always make sure I come back and come back swinging, because yeah, I think a lot of the problem is that not a lot of people talk about it either. But the reality is that it's hard. NDIS is getting worse, and I don't know why. And yeah, it shouldn't be this hard. So I'm glad I've kind of found the same circle of people that are in the same headspace as me, finding it really difficult, but also like something's got to change. Like this isn't good enough. And hopefully I'm trying to put the feelers out to different organisations that I can, you know, join and become a member and advocate and rally and do all these things. But I also have to be mindful of my own burnout and that sort of thing. But whether that's making content or making posts and social media posts, or just being loud about it while still making sure I'm reserving my spoons at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what advice would you give to other parents and business owners in similar situations, such as yours, who may be struggling with advocating for themselves and their loved ones in the NDIS space?
Oh man, I do have a couple of my books actually, and they have said to me like they couldn't have done it without me. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know what I did. I didn't really do anything special, but in their minds, I did. I always say to these people, we have babies and we're told, it takes a village to raise a child, but then there's no village. So I say to them, I'm like, this is your village. I'm creating your village. So my advice is ask the questions, join the Facebook groups. I know a lot of young plans don't offer support coordination, but there are line items we can use usually they're handed improved daily living. There's a line item in there that we can use in the interim just to connect with the right supports and get the right people on board and go to reviews and advocate and reassessments. There are also disability advocacies out there that don't charge because they're based off government initiatives. So look into those as well. You don't have to do it alone. So there is resources out there. Facebook's a really good one, especially like there's like autism parents groups and NDIS autism support and that sort of thing. Like there's
a lot of peer support groups
yeah.
on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely ask the questions. You don't have to do it alone. Like no one, they expect you to, but you don't have to. It's like if they say it's parental responsibility, but if you can only do what you can do. Like it's too much for anyone, really.
That makes perfect sense. I think it was actually suggested in last week's episode that that's the particular case as well. So, how do you use your platform and influence as a mother, business owner, and advocate to bring attention to systemic issues and drive positive change within the NDIS sector?
I think it's taken a little while. When I first went independent, I was still kind of like mindful of this image that I had to put out there and was like, oh, don't rock the boat. Like, you know, just sit still, look pretty, don't upset anyone. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, what are you going to do? Tell my boss? I am my boss. So I don't want to mask my passion about things. So I am very passionate. I do produce content that can rock the boat, and I do get comments that challenge my opinion, and I don't. I initially I'll sit with it and I get like, oh, but then I've also learned to be like, okay, I can learn from this. You can either learn from it and grow and accept that, you know, other opinions and the perspectives, which is that further development sort of thing, the skill learning development, blah. Or you can get offended and get really one-sided and biased, which doesn't help anyone. So I like to put things out there that people typically wouldn't post, I guess. But there is another person in this space that I have found that does the same thing on social media, and I love it. They're an advocate as well. I think they do what I do, but their content is very challenging NDIS, but for like standing at the front of what is the scheme participants and like standing with a big iron sword, like I will fight for you, which I love because I think people think government, we just have to sit down and take it as, you know, because it's the taxpayers' money and all that business. But yeah, I like to rock the boat. I do my research first, but if I do say something that's incorrect, I will own it as well. Like I'm not that proud. Like as I said, I learn from it rather than get upset and narky and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, what resources, training, or support networks have been most helpful to you in your journey for fighting for accountability and justice in the NDIS system?
I think for me as a support coordinator, there is a Facebook group that's run by a wonderful woman by the name of Brodie. It's a support coordinator, psychosocial recovery newcomer group. That is probably my Bible. There are so many out there that I am a part of, and I read these things and I'm like, that's incorrect, that's incorrect, that's incorrect. But I've learned not to waste time trying to explain things to people because, again, you can either learn from it or you can just stay biased. But that group in particular is amazing. I've signed up to different provider like info resources, like DSC is a good one. The intermediate diaries, and a lot of LinkedIn posts. I follow a lot of people on there that do post similar stuff to the type of content that I like, so I get my info from there. And signing up to the NDIS newsletter itself, and I also webinars. I know people typically yawn when it comes to webinars, but particularly around like the price guide. I sat through a recent one learning about the new price guide and just big changes. I've learned to seek out webinars or resources that put it in terms that I can understand, so then I can produce that information as well to my participants or just whoever follows me. Because I mean, the NDIS offer like a easy read version, but it's really not that easy to read sometimes in a lot of cases, and misses a lot of info. So yeah, those are a few resources, and there's some reputable content creators out there But I always make sure, I just say check your, whatever you read, check it.
Which makes
yeah.
perfect sense. So last question I'd like to ask you, if you have 30 seconds of advice you'd like to give somebody in relation to what you do, what would that be?
Oh, God. Stick to what you know. I only work with autistic adults and children. I have a few that have different disabilities, but I don't typically work outside of that because that is what I know, that is what I can research, and that is what I can advocate for. If it is possible, stick to your own little niche space and be that person for those people. But also just, be kind to yourself, because the system has been designed to try and defeat people like us. And it's not you, it's the system. So.
All right. Well, thank you. On that note, thank you very much, Ange McArthur, for joining us on the Deep Dive podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you. For more information, visit her website at acmcarthurservices.com.au or Instagram at acmacarthur_services. We'll see you next time.